Hello, AP Psychology students. Today we are going to be reviewing learning in preparation for your exam this spring. So what is learning? Learning is defined as a relatively permanent change in behavior that occurs in response to experience. This comes in various forms, which each function according to specific principles. One of these forms is known as classical conditioning and was studied by Ivan Pavlov. He taught dogs to salivate at the sound of a bell by repeatedly pairing the arrival of food with the sound of this bell. The dogs would salivate when the bell rang due to the association they had formed between the bell and the food. This scenario showed classical conditioning. In this process, an original unconditioned stimulus that naturally elicits a reflexive unconditioned response is repeatedly paired with a neutral stimulus enough times that the learner forms an association between the two and produces the behavioral response in reaction to the neutral stimulus. The neutral stimulus then becomes the conditioned stimulus, and the previously unconditioned response becomes the conditioned response. In other words, classical conditioning is a method of learning that creates new associations between neutral stimuli and reflex-causing stimuli. John Watson exhibited classical conditioning in his Little Albert experiment, in which he conditioned a 9-month-old boy to fear a white rat by exposing the child to the rat and making loud, alarming noises at the same time. Eventually, baby Albert feared the rat even when unaccompanied by loud noises, due to the association that he had formed between the two. This experiment depicts Robert Rescorla's argument that an unconditioned stimulus is more effective if it surprises the learner. Additionally, baby Albert's fear of the rat illustrates expectancy, or the anticipation of future events or associations based on past experience. Acquisition refers to the process through which a behavior or conditioned response is learned. Extinction refers to the end of a learned response, usually resulting from an end to conditioning. Spontaneous recovery occurs when a learned response that was previously thought to be extinct reappears. Stimulus generalization is the tendency to respond to another stimulus that is similar but not identical to the original conditioned stimulus. For example, a dog in Pavlov's experiment might salivate at the sound of a buzzer if it sounds similar enough to the original bell. Stimulus discrimination, on the other hand, occurs when one has the ability to distinguish between similar but non-identical stimuli. Previously conditioned stimuli may be used to further future learning in higher order or second order conditioning. This may look like a neutral stimulus being repeatedly paired with an already conditioned stimulus so that the neutral stimulus becomes a conditioned stimulus itself, eliciting the conditioned response. On to our next topic, operant conditioning. This is based on the idea that human behavior is influenced by operants in the environment. These include positive and negative reinforcement, which encourage behavior, as well as punishment, which suppresses behavior. This method involves making an active choice to perform a behavior, while classical conditioning involves an uncontrollable reflexive response. Operant conditioning was previously known as the law of effect, coined by Edward Thorndike. This is the idea that responses that lead to positive effects are repeated, while behaviors that lead to negative effects are not repeated. B.F. Skinner studied this concept in his Skinner box experiments, in which he was shaping or gradually molding rats' behavior so that they learned to use a lever to receive food, a positive reinforcer. The lever in this experiment acted as a discriminative stimulus, or a stimulus that elicits a response. This experiment used positive reinforcement, meaning a desirable stimulus, aka the food, was added, increasing a desired behavior. Negative reinforcement means an undesirable stimulus is removed and also increases a desired behavior. Positive punishment is when an unpleasant stimulus is added, and this decreases an undesired behavior. Negative punishment is when a pleasant stimulus is removed, also decreasing an undesired behavior. Escape conditioning occurs when a learner is conditioned to perform a behavior in order to escape an already unpleasant stimulus, while avoidance conditioning occurs when a learner is conditioned to perform a behavior to prevent an unpleasant stimulus from happening in the future. A primary reinforcer is a stimulus that is intrinsically pleasant, often because it satisfies a basic need. while a secondary reinforcer is a stimulus that individuals have been conditioned to desire through association with a primary reinforcer. Secondary reinforcers include token reinforcers that are tangible, such as money or gold stars from teachers. Reinforcement can follow different schedules. Schedules of reinforcement, or plans of how often reinforcement is used, come in several forms. Continuous reinforcement is the use of reinforcement after each and every instance of a desired response. Partial reinforcement is the use of reinforcement after a desired response only part of the time. Fixed ratio is a schedule in which reinforcement follows a constant number of responses, such as every fifth response. Variable ratio is a schedule in which reinforcement follows a varied number of responses, meaning the learner would not know when to expect reinforcement. Fixed interval is a schedule in which reinforcement for a desired response is only available after a set amount of time, such as every 10 minutes. Variable interval is a schedule in which reinforcement for a desired response is only available after a varying amount of time, once again causing the learner to not know when to expect reinforcement. Partial reinforcement can be more effective in conditioning behaviors than continuous reinforcement, given that it can lead to an extinction effect, which makes behaviors harder to stop following partial reinforcement schedules due to the learner not being able to expect when reinforcement will occur. Other types of learning include observational learning or social learning, in which individuals learn by observing others. Albert Bandura demonstrated this in his Bobo doll experiments, in which children acted aggressively towards a Bobo doll after watching an adult act aggressively towards the same doll. Edward Tolman developed the idea of latent learning, which occurs without reinforcement and is shown by later behaviors when reinforcement is eventually provided. He conducted experiments in which rats learned to run mazes even when reinforcement was withheld. John Garcia studied associations and proposed the idea of taste aversion, or the disliking of certain food based on past experiences in which the food caused sickness. Another product of association is superstitious behavior, which is learned through an accidental reinforcement process, in which one event randomly follows another, and the witness forms a random association, creating a false link between cause and effect. Martin Seligman investigated the concept of a learned inability to overcome obstacles or avoid punishment, known as learned helplessness. He did so through experiments on dogs that were unable to escape unpleasant situations. The types of learning don't stop there. Trial and error learning refers to when a person tries a series of random solutions in order to find one that works. Insight learning is a type of learning that occurs by suddenly understanding how to solve a problem rather than by trial and error. Cognitive learning is a high-level learning process that involves thinking, anticipating, and other complex mental processes. Cognitive maps, or mental representations of an environment or concept, help facilitate cognitive learning. Emotional learning relates to how emotions and emotional states affect cognitive processes, including memory formation and retrieval. State-dependent learning refers to the idea that being in the same mental and physical state in which you learned information enables you to better remember said information later on. Learning can also be affected by one's self-efficacy, or the extent to which a person believes themselves capable of doing something. People can learn to change behaviors through behavior modification, or the process and techniques used to change a particular behavior. Systematic desensitization is an example of a behavior modification technique that attempts to treat phobias through planned exposure to fearful stimuli. Aversion therapy is a process of behavior modification that works by associating an undesirable habitual behavior with an unpleasant stimulus. To measure stress caused by undesired behaviors, biofeedback measures automatic bodily functions like heart rate, blood pressure, and other stress responses for the purpose of bringing those functions under partially voluntary control. Individuals can also utilize behavioral and cognitive coping strategies to manage stress caused by undesired behaviors. That is the end of our crash course on learning. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to see any more resources from our team, please follow Action Lab on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter and YouTube. And if you'd like to learn more about our lab and our current studies, you may scan the QR code on the screen. Thanks again for watching, and good luck on your exams.